Look, nobody joins the Galactic Military Academy expecting to have fun. That's kind of the whole point. You show up, you get yelled at by aliens with too many limbs. You learn 17 different ways to salute species you can't pronounce. And if you're really lucky, you graduate without accidentally starting an interstellar incident. Standard stuff. But the silence ceremony? That was something special. And by special, I mean cosmically stupid. I'm Sergeant Jake Murphy, and I was about 30 seconds away from ruining 10,000 years of tradition. Not on purpose, mind you. I never do anything on purpose. That's what Captain Velkoth kept saying anyway, usually while his 4 eyes twitched in perfect synchronized fury. Captain Velkoth was Corinthian, which meant he had scales that changed color based on mood. Currently a deep purple that the translator helpfully informed me meant profound disappointment. 4 eyes that could look in different directions simultaneously so he could judge you from multiple angles at once, and absolutely zero capacity for what humans call fun. He stood at the front of the Hall of Ancient Relics, like a statue carved from pure military regulation. The hall itself was this massive cathedral-like space, all floating crystalline architecture and mood lighting that probably cost more than my home planet's GDP. At the center, on a pedestal that was definitely overcompensating for something, sat the Sentinel Stone. It looked like someone had compressed a thunderstorm into a boulder and then polished it until it could reflect your deepest insecurities back at you. According to legend, the stone contained the consciousness of Commander Brax, the greatest warrior of the first civilization, the guys who supposedly invented organized warfare and then ascended to a higher plane of existence or whatever. Very mystical, very serious, very much not something you were supposed to laugh at. There were about 200 of us packed into the hall, cadets from 40 different species, all standing in perfect formation. Well, mostly perfect. Private Glorp standing next to me was a Blobarian, which meant he was essentially a sentient pile of lime green jello with eyeballs. He was also shaking like he'd been plugged into an electrical socket. The ceremony required absolute silence. Not just quiet. Silence. The kind of silence that made you aware of your own heartbeat and immediately convinced that everyone else could hear it too, and was judging you for it. One sound, one cough, one digestive gurgle from any species equivalent of intestines, and the whole thing was ruined. Then everyone got punishment duty, which involved cleaning the waste recycling units with your tongue. Allegedly. Velkoth's voice cut through the silence like a knife through warm butter. Warm, terrified butter. Cadets. Today you witness the most sacred tradition of the Academy. The Sentinel Stone before you contains the wisdom of ages. The warrior's code made manifest. When you gaze upon it in perfect silence, you commune with the very essence of discipline and honor. I was trying so hard not to roll my eyes that I might have pulled a muscle. Somewhere behind me I heard someone whisper, "Here we go again," and one of Velkoth's eyes immediately swiveled backward to locate the offender. Creepy, but effective. The lights dimmed. Dramatic music started playing from somewhere. Probably hidden speakers, though knowing the Academy, it might have been a dedicated choir of monks in another dimension. The stone began to glow with this ethereal blue light that was admittedly pretty cool, even if the whole setup felt like the universe's most expensive meditation retreat. That's when Glorp's shaking intensified. Glorp was nervous. I mean, all Blobarians were nervous. It was basically their factory setting, but this was advanced nervousness. His gelatinous body was vibrating at a frequency that I was pretty sure violated several laws of physics, and at least one Geneva Convention equivalent. The problem with nervous Blobarians is that they release spores. Tiny, invisible, incredibly irritating spores that their species uses as a defense mechanism. Great for escaping predators. Terrible for standing next to a human with seasonal allergies in an enclosed space during a ceremony that required absolute silence. I felt the tickle in my nose immediately. Oh no, oh no, 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 no. I tried everything. I wrinkled my nose, I wiggled it. I thought about sad puppies and HFY returns, and that one time I walked in on my bunkmate doing yoga naked. Nothing worked. The tickle became a burn. The burn became an urgent biological imperative that could not be denied. Velkoth was mid-speech about honor and sacrifice, and probably the importance of polishing your boots to reflect your soul or whatever. His voice droned on. In silence we find clarity. In stillness we find strength. In absolute quiet we find... I sneezed. Not a polite sneeze. Not a suppressed sneeze. A full, explosive human sneeze that echoed off every crystalline surface in the hall like a sonic weapon. It was the kind of sneeze that made you question whether you had accidentally expelled part of your brain. It was glorious and terrible and completely unavoidable. The silence that followed was somehow louder than the sneeze. 200 pairs of alien eyes plus Velkoth's 4 all turned to look at me. Even Glorp stopped shaking. Velkoth's scales shifted through a color spectrum that my translator couldn't keep up with, flashing warnings about rage and disbelief and probably several Corinthian curse words. "Sergeant Murphy," Velkoth said, his voice so quiet it was somehow more terrifying than yelling. "You have just..." He never got to finish that sentence. The sentinel stone started humming, not a mystical, ethereal hum, a vibrating, almost mechanical hum that built in intensity until the whole pedestal was shaking. The blue glow flickered, pulsed, and then the stone did something that, according to every historical record, it had never done before. It laughed. Deep, booming, absolutely delighted laughter that filled the entire hall and made the crystalline walls resonate in harmony. It was the kind of laugh that made you want to laugh too, even though you had no idea what was funny. It was infectious and absurd, and completely impossible. Velkoth's scales turned white. I didn't know they could do that. The translator informed me that white meant existential crisis. Accurate. "Impossible," Velkoth whispered. "The stone has been silent for 10,000 years. It does not react. It does not laugh. It certainly does not..." The laughter got louder. And then, in a display of holographic technology that probably shouldn't have been possible 10,000 years ago, a figure materialized above the stone. He was big, broad-shouldered, with armor that looked like it had been through several wars and a face that was split in the widest grin I'd ever seen. His species was hard to place, some kind of humanoid with features that could have been from a dozen different worlds, but his expression was universal, pure unfiltered mischief. "Oh man," the figure said, his voice still shaking with laughter. "Oh man, I needed that. 10,000 years in a rock and the first thing I hear is the most disrespectful sneeze in galactic history. That's comedy gold right there. Who's the comedian?" Every eye in the hall slowly turned back to me. I raised my hand. "That would be me, sir, Sergeant Jake Murphy, human. Sorry about your ceremony." The figure's grin somehow got wider. "Sorry? Kid, that was the best thing that's happened to me in 10 millennia. Commander Brack's First Warrior Civilization and I have not laughed like that since I convinced my entire fleet to attack the enemy wearing clown makeup. Good times." Velkoth made a sound like a deflating balloon. "Commander Brax, the legendary warrior, the architect of the Eternal Code. You are telling me that you found this disruption amusing?" Brax looked at Velkoth like he'd just asked if water was wet. "Amusing? It was hilarious. Your whole setup here is hilarious. The dramatic lighting, the spooky music, everyone standing around looking constipated. You've turned warfare into a funeral. Where's the joy? Where's the chaos? Where's the fun?" "Fun?" Velkoth repeated, his voice flat. "You speak of fun, in the Hall of Ancient Relics, during the silence ceremony." "Yeah," Brax said. "Fun, remember that? Or did your species evolve past it along with your sense of proportion?" I started laughing. I couldn't help it. This 10,000-year-old legendary warrior was roasting my drill captain, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever witnessed. Brax pointed at me. "See? The human gets it." "What's your name again, kid?" "Murphy, sir. Jake Murphy." "Murphy, I like you already. You and I are going to get along just fine." Velkoth's scales were cycling through colors so fast he looked like a malfunctioning traffic light. "This is unacceptable. Commander Brax, with all due respect, you are a sacred relic. You represent the pinnacle of warrior discipline and..." I represent a guy who got stuffed in a rock because I wouldn't take things seriously enough. Brax interrupted. My civilization didn't ascend, Captain whatever your name is. They got so uptight about protocol and honor that they forgot how to actually fight. They locked me up because I kept winning battles using jokes and psychological warfare, and that wasn't dignified enough for them. Then they died out, because they were boring. The hall had gone silent again, but this time it was the stunned silence of having your entire worldview shattered in real time. Brax looked around at all the shocked faces and sighed. All right, story time. Everyone sit down. This is going to take a while, and standing at attention is exactly the kind of pointless formality that killed my people. Literally. Sit. Velkoth looked like he might have an aneurysm, but slowly, hesitantly, cadets started sitting. I plopped down cross-legged immediately. Glorp oozed into a comfortable puddle shape next to me. That's better, Brax said, settling into a sitting position himself, even though he was a hologram and didn't need to. Now let me tell you about the first warrior civilization, and how everything you've been taught about us is catastrophically wrong. The first warrior civilization, according to every textbook in the galaxy, was the pinnacle of military excellence. They'd invented the Warriors Code, established the protocols for honorable combat, and created a legacy of discipline that had guided countless civilizations for millennia. They were serious, they were stoic. They were the reason drill instructors everywhere could say, "This is how it's always been done," without getting laughed at. According to Commander Brax, they were also complete idiots who'd gotten themselves killed because they forgot that war was supposed to be survivable. Let me paint you a picture, Brax said, gesturing expansively, even though his holographic hands passed through everything. 10,000 years ago, my people were the dominant military force in the galaxy. You know why? Because we were practical. We didn't care about honor or glory. We cared about winning and going home alive. That meant we used every advantage we could find. Psychological warfare, I said, grinning. I was already loving this. Exactly, Brax pointed at me. Murphy gets it. We'd show up to battle wearing the most ridiculous armor we could design. Bright pink, polka dots. One time I personally led a charge wearing a helmet shaped like a giant fruit. The enemy was so confused they forgot to shoot at us properly. We won that battle with a 70% reduction in casualties. Velkoth's voice was strained. That is not how warfare is conducted. There are rules, protocols, honor demands. Honor demands victory. Brax cut him off. Everything else is just marketing. You want to know what really happened to my civilization? We got successful. Too successful. We started having philosophers instead of soldiers. Started writing books about the proper way to die gloriously in battle instead of focusing on the proper way to not die at all. The young warriors started caring more about looking good in their ceremonial armor than about actual combat effectiveness. He shook his holographic head. I tried to stop it. Kept teaching the old ways. Kept winning battles using ridiculous tactics that worked, but the high command got embarrassed. Said I was making us look undignified in front of the other civilizations. They wanted us to fight fair, to be noble, to sacrifice ourselves beautifully if necessary. Let me guess, I said. The other civilizations didn't fight fair. Bingo. The Kreshtok Empire rolled up with no concept of honor whatsoever, used every dirty trick in the book, and my people stood there in perfect formation waiting to die gloriously. Which they did. Very gloriously. Very dead. The High Command's last act was to stick me in this rock as punishment for being right, with a note that said, "May future generations learn from your irreverence," or some garbage like that. The hall was completely silent now, but it was the engaged silence of 200 minds being blown simultaneously. Brax looked around at all of us. So yeah, when I hear Captain Rigid over there going on about honor and silence and sacred traditions, all I hear is the same nonsense that killed my entire civilization. And when Murphy here sneezes during your spooky ceremony and breaks your rules, all I see is someone who's not so brainwashed by protocol that he's forgotten he's a living being with biological functions. I really was trying not to sneeze, I offered. And that's what makes it perfect, Brax said. You tried to follow the stupid rule, but biology won. Biology always wins. You can't code your way past having a body. My people forgot that. Started thinking they could transcend physical reality through sheer force of discipline. Spoiler alert, you can't. Velkoth had been silent for a while, his scales settling into a dark blue that apparently meant deep thought. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Commander Brax, are you suggesting that everything we've built on your civilization's legacy is wrong? Not wrong, Brax said. Incomplete. You took the worst parts of what we became and ignored the best parts of what we were. You got the ceremony and missed the substance. The first warrior civilization was great because we were adaptable, creative, and we didn't take ourselves too seriously. Then we started taking ourselves too seriously, and we stopped being great. You've been imitating our failure, not our success. He grinned at me. But humans, apparently, humans remember the important stuff. Murphy here broke your ceremony, and instead of apologizing and falling in line, he's sitting there looking like he's watching his favorite comedy show. That's the warrior spirit. Not giving a damn about looking dignified when there's something actually important to focus on. To be fair, I said, I thought I was going to get punished so severely that my grandchildren would feel it. I was just accepting my fate. Even better, Brax laughed, accepting consequences without letting them change who you are. Kid, you're like a time capsule from when my people were still worth a damn. Velkoth stood up slowly, all four eyes focused on Brax. This is heresy. Centuries of tradition dismissed because of a sneeze and a hologram with a poor attitude. It's not heresy if the tradition was wrong to begin with, Brax shot back. And it's not just a sneeze, Captain. It's a symptom. Your whole operation here is designed to produce obedient soldiers who follow orders without thinking. That's not warfare, that's manufacturing victims. Real warriors need to think, adapt, and yes, occasionally ignore stupid orders. Stupid orders, Velkoth repeated, such as requiring silence during a sacred ceremony. Such as any order that prioritizes appearance over effectiveness, Brax said. Tell me, Captain, when was the last time one of your perfect, obedient graduates did something unexpected in the field and saved lives because of it? Velkoth opened his mouth, closed it, and his scales flickered uncertainly. That's what I thought, Brax said. You're training soldiers who will die gloriously following orders, just like my people did. Meanwhile, Murphy here would probably survive because he'd do something completely inappropriate that nobody saw coming. Hey, I said. I resent the implication that I'd do something inappropriate. I'd do something extremely inappropriate. Brax's laugh boomed through the hall again. I changed my mind. I don't like you, Murphy. I love you. You and I are going to revolutionize this whole operation. Velkoth's scales went purple again. Absolutely not. This is still my academy, and I will not have 10,000 years of tradition overturned because of one undisciplined human and a hologram with delusions of relevance. Delusions of relevance? Brax's eyebrows rose. Buddy, I won 247 battles using tactics that are still too advanced for you to understand. I trained warriors who could adapt to anything. I wrote the original version of your precious warrior's code before my successors ruined it. And I'm stuck in this rock, which means I've got literally nothing but time. So here's what's going to happen. He leaned forward, his grin turning challenging. You're going to let Murphy prove that my way works better than yours. We're going to have a little demonstration, him using my techniques, against your best tactical squad using traditional methods. When he wins, you admit that maybe, just maybe, your entire educational philosophy needs some work. And when he loses? Velkoth asked, his confidence returning. Then I'll go back to sleep for another 10,000 years and you can continue producing cannon fodder in peace, Brax said. Deal? The entire hall held its collective breath. This was insane. This was career-ending. This was exactly the kind of chaos that would get me court-martialed and probably ejected from an airlock. I raised my hand again. Just to be clear, do I get a say in this? No, both Brax and Velkoth said simultaneously. Cool, just checking, I said. Let's do it. Velkoth wasted no time setting up the simulation, probably because he wanted to humiliate me as quickly as possible and get back to his comfortable worldview where everything made sense and nobody laughed during important ceremonies. The simulation arena was a holographic battlefield that could replicate any terrain, any conditions, and any level of pain feedback you were stupid enough to enable. I was standing in the preparation room with Brax's hologram floating next to me, watching through the window as Velkoth's elite tactical squad geared up. There were 6 of them, all top marks, all different species, all looking extremely confident that they were about to make an example out of the disrespectful human. "So," I said, "any actual advice, or are we just winging this?" "Winging it is advice," Brax said. "But sure, let me give you the crash course in First Civilization combat tactics. Lesson 1. The enemy's expectations are a weapon you can use against them." Cryptic. Love it. More specific? Brax grinned. "Those 6 out there have trained together for months. They know their roles, they have a plan. They're coordinated, professional, and they're going to execute a textbook assault strategy because that's what they have been taught." "And I should do what exactly?" "Anything except what they expect. Make them question reality. Make them doubt their training. Make them so confused that they stop functioning as a unit and start making individual mistakes." He paused. "Also, tell really bad jokes. That's important." "Wait, seriously?" "Completely seriously. Humans have this thing you do with humor where you can make it uncomfortable or disarming at will. It's a superpower. Most species either don't get jokes at all or they're too predictable with them. But humans can weaponize awkwardness like nobody else." I thought about that. "So you want me to dad joke them into submission?" "If that's what you call it, yes." "Exactly that." The arena door opened. Velkoth's voice came through the speakers. "Sergeant Murphy, you will have standard light armor and a training weapon. Your objective is to capture the flag at the center of the arena or eliminate all opposing forces. Your opponents have the same objective. This is a live simulation with pain feedback enabled. Do you understand?" "Understood, Captain," I said. "Quick question. Is there a time limit?" 20 minutes. More than enough time for a trained squad to neutralize a single opponent." "Cool, cool. And just so we're clear, when I win, we're calling this a victory for the power of laughter over the forces of rigid traditionalism, right?" I could practically hear Velkoth's teeth grinding. "When you lose, Sergeant, we will be calling it a lesson in respecting authority. Begin in 30 seconds. I stepped into the arena. The simulation loaded around me, creating a ruined cityscape with plenty of cover, multiple levels, and enough complexity that a coordinated squad would have a significant advantage over a lone operator. Standard stuff. Brax's voice appeared in my ear, somehow patched directly into my neural comm. "All right, Murphy, show me what humans are made of." "Sarcasm and poor life choices, mostly," I said. "Perfect, use both." The simulation started. I immediately ran in the opposite direction of the flag, which was already not according to any plan in the tactical handbook. I found a nice collapsed building with good sight lines and settled in behind cover. "Murphy, what are you doing?" Brax asked. "The flag is that way." "I know, but they expect me to go for the flag, so I'm going to let them take it and then ambush them on the way back." "Oh, you beautiful, devious human. Your species is my new favorite." I watched through a crack in the rubble as the elite squad moved through the arena in perfect formation. They were good, I had to admit. Coordinated advances, covering fire, proper spacing. They reached the flag in about 3 minutes and secured it without opposition. That's when I activated my comm on an open channel. "Hey guys, quick question. Why did the Corinthian cross the road?" There was a pause. One of the squad members, a Threxian with way too many arms, responded. "What? Murphy, is that you?" "Yeah, it's me. But seriously, why did the Corinthian cross the road?" "This is a tactical exercise, not a comedy club," another voice said. "To get to the other side? No, wait, because someone told him to and he was too disciplined to question it. That's the joke, it's a commentary on blind obedience." "Ignore him," the squad leader said. "He's trying to distract us." Am I, though? Or am I providing valuable comic relief during a stressful situation? It's hard to say, really. I watched them tighten their formation, probably trying to move quickly back to their base. I relocated silently, using a path Brax highlighted for me that would put me above their route. Hey guys, still there? I said. I've got another one. How many drill instructors does it take to screw in a light bulb? Silence. Trick question. Drill instructors don't change anything. They just stand in the dark and yell about how much better things were in the old days. Murphy, when we catch you, the pain feedback is going to be set to maximum, the squad leader growled. That's not very sporting. Also, does your species have light bulbs? I'm realizing this joke might not translate. Hang on, let me think of a universal one. I dropped down behind them as they passed under my position, landing silently on the rear guard. One quick strike with the training weapon and he was eliminated, his armor flashing red and locking up to simulate injury. 5 left, Brack said in my ear. Nice and quiet. I like it. Thanks. I learned it from a documentary about ninjas. The squad realized they'd lost someone and immediately went into defensive formation, which was exactly what I wanted. Defensive formations are great against frontal assaults, terrible against someone who's not playing by the rules. I activated the comm again. Did you guys hear that? I think one of you dropped out. Was it Tim? I feel like his name was Tim. My name is Kreshnax, the eliminated soldier's voice said from outside the arena. Close enough. So anyway, question for the group. What's the difference between a tactical squad and a comedy improv team? Nobody responded, but I could see them scanning the area, trying to locate me. I was already moving to my next position. Improv teams are better at adapting to unexpected situations. That's the punchline. It's funny because it's true. I could see the squad leader, Avraxian, with natural camouflage, getting frustrated. Good. Frustrated people make mistakes. Murphy, your psychological warfare is primitive and ineffective, he said. Is it though? Because you're talking to me instead of focusing on your environment. Speaking of which, there's a really interesting piece of rubble to your left that you should probably check out. 3 of them immediately looked left. I came from the right, eliminated another soldier, and vanished back into cover before they could react. 4 left, Brax said, and I could hear the approval in his voice. You're doing the thing. The beautiful, stupid, effective thing. The remaining squad members were clustering together now, backs to each other, scanning constantly. They'd abandoned the flag to focus on finding me. Amateur move. You know what your problem is? I said over the comm. You trained for tactics. I trained to survive training. There's a difference. What difference? One of them asked, clearly despite himself. You guys work as a team, that's great until the team falls apart. Me? I'm used to operating in chaos because military training is chaos with PowerPoints. I'm basically chaos-proof at this point. I popped up from a completely different location than where I'd been talking from, through a simulated flashbang that Brax had marked in the arena environment, and eliminated 2 more in the confusion. 2 left. The squad leader and 1 other soldier back-to-back, weapons ready, searching for me in every direction. Gotta say, I told them, I'm impressed you've lasted this long. Most people give up after the 3rd dad joke. Show yourself, Murphy, the squad leader said. Face us with honor. Honor? I stepped out from cover but kept my distance. Honor is great and all, but it doesn't beat winning. Your move. They both aimed at me, but I was already throwing a simulated smoke grenade, again courtesy of Brax's knowledge of where the arena kept its environmental props. In the confusion, I flanked around, came up behind the 2nd soldier and eliminated him. Just the squad leader left, somewhere in the smoke. You know what the real lesson is here? I called out. It's not that I'm better than you, you guys are great, really well trained. The lesson is that sometimes the person who wins isn't the most skilled or the most prepared. Sometimes it's just the person who's willing to be the most ridiculous. The smoke cleared. The squad leader was facing me, weapon raised. We both fired at the same time. But I'd been moving while talking and he'd been standing still trying to track my voice. My shot hit. His missed. Arena over. Winner, Murphy. The simulation faded, and I was back in the regular arena, looking through the window at Velkoth's face. All 4 of his eyes were twitching independently, which I was pretty sure was a record. Brax was laughing so hard his hologram was flickering. Oh man, oh Murphy, that was beautiful. That was art. That was everything my civilization used to be before we forgot how to have fun. The door to the arena opened and the 6 eliminated squad members filed out. looking confused and slightly traumatized. One of them stopped next to me. "The jokes," he said. "Were they really necessary?" "Absolutely," I said. "They were structurally critical to my entire strategy." They were terrible. And yet, here we are. Velkoth entered the arena, his scales doing something I'd never seen before, cycling through colors so fast he looked like a kaleidoscope. He stopped in front of me, all four eyes fixed on my face. "That," he said slowly, "was the most undisciplined, unprofessional, and utterly disrespectful tactical display I have ever witnessed." "Thank you, sir." "It was not a compliment. I choose to interpret it as one anyway, sir." His scales settled on something between purple and blue that the translator labeled as grudging respect mixed with existential frustration. "You won," he said finally. "Using techniques that violate every principle of military doctrine, you defeated a squad that should have eliminated you in under 5 minutes. Commander Brax, it appears you have made your point." Brax materialized next to us, still grinning. "My point is that everything you've been teaching these kids is half right at best and catastrophically wrong at worst. Murphy here just proved that a warrior who can think and adapt beats a squad of robots following programming every time." "We are not robots," the squad leader protested. "We are disciplined soldiers." "Disciplined soldiers who just got beaten by a guy making jokes about light bulbs," I pointed out. "Not trying to rub it in, just stating facts." Velkoth was silent for a long moment, his eyes unfocused like he was processing something fundamental. When he spoke, his voice was different, quieter, more uncertain. "If what you say is true, Commander Brax, then we have been training our cadets incorrectly for generations. We have been preparing them to fail." "Not incorrectly," Brax said, his tone surprisingly gentle. "Incompletely. You've been teaching them to follow orders, which is important. You just forgot to teach them when to ignore orders, which is equally important. Balance, Captain. That's what makes a real warrior." "And how?" Velkoth asked. "Do you teach someone when to break the rules without teaching them to be undisciplined?" Brax looked at me. I looked at Brax. We both shrugged at the same time. "You kind of have to figure that out yourself," I said. "That's the whole point. Real discipline isn't following orders. It's knowing which orders to follow and which ones to politely disregard while achieving the actual objective. It's messy. It's imperfect. It's human. And apparently," Velkoth said, "it is effective." Word spread fast. Within an hour, the entire academy knew that Sergeant Murphy, the human who'd sneezed during the silence ceremony, had single-handedly defeated the elite tactical squad using jokes and guerrilla tactics. Within 2 hours, half the cadets were treating me like some kind of folk hero, and the other half were convinced I'd cheated somehow. Velkoth called an assembly in the main training hall. Every cadet, instructor, and administrator packed in, curious about what would happen next. I stood at the front with Brax's hologram floating next to me, feeling extremely aware that I was probably about to get either court-martialed or promoted, and I wasn't sure which would be worse. Velkoth stood at the podium, his scales a neutral gray that could have meant anything. He looked at the assembled crowd, then at me, then at Brax. "Today," he began, "we witnessed something unprecedented. Sergeant Murphy defeated our top tactical squad using methods that defy conventional military wisdom. Commander Brax has suggested that this demonstrates a flaw in our training methodology." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Glorp, still standing near me, was vibrating with what I hoped was excitement rather than more spores. "I have spent my career believing in the value of discipline, tradition, and order," Velkoth continued. "These beliefs have not changed. However, I am forced to acknowledge that perhaps they have been incomplete." He paused, and I swear all 4 of his eyes focused directly on me at once. It was unsettling. "Sergeant Murphy, step forward." I stepped forward, trying to look more confident than I felt. Brax drifted along next to me, his holographic form flickering slightly. "You have demonstrated skill, adaptability, and tactical thinking under pressure," Velkoth said. "You have also demonstrated a complete disregard for protocol, an inability to take things seriously, and a tendency to use humor as a weapon, which is frankly disturbing." "Thank you, sir," I said. because I genuinely couldn't tell if that was criticism or praise. Therefore, Velkoth continued, I am creating a new training program. Experimental, unorthodox, probably going to get me demoted, but necessary. This program will combine traditional military discipline with Commander Brax's approach to psychological warfare and adaptive tactics, and you, Sergeant Murphy, are going to help teach it. The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and protests. I stood there, pretty sure I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? You heard me correctly, Velkoth said, his scales shifting to what might have been amusement. If we are going to teach cadets to think like you do, we need someone who actually thinks like you do. Consider this your punishment for disrupting the silent ceremony. That's the best punishment I've ever heard of, I said. It is not meant to be enjoyable. You will be working directly under my supervision, which means I will be watching your every move, judging your every decision, and making your life significantly more difficult than it already is. Still sounds great, sir. Velkoth's scales flickered purple. You are impossible. That's literally what Brax has been saying is my best quality. Brax laughed, the sound echoing through the training hall. He's not wrong, Captain. Impossible is exactly what you need around here. These cadets have been taught how to be possible, predictable, and easily defeated. Murphy here is going to teach them how to be problems. We prefer the term solutions, one of the instructors called out. You would, Brax shot back. But here's the thing. Problems win wars. Solutions just sound good in reports. Murphy's going to teach these kids how to be the kind of soldiers that enemy commanders have nightmares about. The ones who don't do what they're supposed to do and somehow win anyway. The next few weeks were chaos. Beautiful educational chaos. Velkoth set up the new program with the kind of reluctant efficiency that suggested he was hoping it would fail quickly, so he could go back to the old ways. But Brax and I had other plans. The first class consisted of 20 volunteers, cadets who'd either been inspired by my victory or were just bored enough to try something different. I stood in front of them in a training room that Velkoth had specifically chosen for being the most formal and intimidating space available, probably trying to maintain some dignity. All right, I said, looking at the sea of alien faces staring at me with varying degrees of skepticism. Welcome to Unconventional Warfare 101, or as I like to call it, how to win fights by confusing everyone, including yourself. I'm Sergeant Murphy, and this is Commander Brax, who's been dead for 10,000 years, but is somehow still better at this than most of you. Thanks, kid. You really know how to make an ancient warrior consciousness feel valued. It's a gift, so first lesson, everyone stand up. They all stood, snapping to attention like they'd been conditioned to do. Perfect posture, eyes forward, completely rigid. Great. Now sit down however you want, slouch, lean, I don't care. Get comfortable. They hesitated, looking at each other like I'd just asked them to solve a quantum physics equation using interpretive dance. Slowly, uncertainly, they sat down in various casual positions. Glorp oozed into what I can only describe as a lounge shape. Congratulations, I said. You've just completed your first exercise in thinking for yourselves. Lesson 1. Comfort and efficiency beat tradition every time. You know why soldiers stand at attention? Because it looks impressive. You know what it doesn't do? Help you fight better. So unless you're in a parade, stop wasting energy on looking good and start focusing on being effective. One cadet, a Draxian with scales similar to Velkoth's, raised a hand. But Sergeant, discipline requires maintaining proper form even when it's uncomfortable. Does it, though? Or does discipline mean doing what needs to be done regardless of how it looks? Those are two different things. I paced in front of them. Real discipline is getting up every day and doing your job even when you don't want to. Real discipline is keeping your head in a crisis when everyone else is panicking. Real discipline is not what you look like when you're standing still. It's what you do when everything goes wrong. Brax's hologram nodded approvingly. Tell them about the fruit helmet. Oh, you want the fruit helmet story? I want the fruit helmet story. I grinned. Okay, so 10,000 years ago, Commander Brax here led a charge against an enemy position while wearing a helmet shaped like a giant fruit. Tell them which fruit, Brax. It was a melon, specifically, a watermelon equivalent from my homeworld. Bright pink, about 3 feet tall, completely ridiculous. The class was silent, trying to process this information. The enemy, Brax continued, was so utterly confused by what they were seeing that their firing patterns became erratic. They couldn't take us seriously. They started laughing. Their commanders were screaming at them to focus. Meanwhile, my troops, who were wearing normal armor and taking advantage of the distraction, flanked around and captured the position with minimal casualties. We won that battle because I wore a fruit on my head. That's not warfare, the Draxian cadet protested. That's a joke. It's both, I said. And that's the point. The enemy expected a standard military assault. They got something their training never prepared them for. Their doctrine had no answers. So they failed. I let that sink in for a moment. Every military in the galaxy trains their soldiers to handle expected threats using established protocols. Know what they don't train them for? Weird nonsense that makes no sense. That's your advantage, that's what we're teaching here. How to be the weird nonsense that breaks the enemy's ability to respond effectively. Over the following days, we ran exercises that would have given Velkoth a stroke if he'd seen them. I had cadets practice fighting while telling stories to distract themselves from fear. I had them design the most psychologically disturbing armor they could imagine. I had them compete to see who could come up with the most effective, inappropriate joke for different combat situations. Brax provided historical context, telling stories about battles won through unconventional thinking. He talked about the time his civilization pretended to retreat, then played recorded sounds of a massive army approaching from behind the enemy, causing them to panic and flee into an actual ambush. He described psychological operations that involved sending the enemy gift baskets with ominous notes. He explained how his best warriors were the ones who could make the enemy question reality itself. Velkoth observed from a distance, his scales cycling through colors that suggested he was having an ongoing internal crisis. But he didn't shut us down. And slowly, grudgingly, I saw him start to understand. The turning point came during a large-scale simulation. Traditional tactics versus unconventional warfare. 50 cadets trained the old way against my 20 misfits who'd embraced the chaos. The traditional group had better coordination, better discipline, better everything by standard metrics. They should have won easily. They lasted 12 minutes. My group came at them from directions that didn't make tactical sense. They used psychological warfare that ranged from creepy whispers over the comm channels to one cadet who just kept asking the enemy team if they'd filed their quarterly reports. They broke every rule in the engagement handbook and won decisively. Velkoth watched the whole thing, his scales slowly shifting to a color my translator identified as acceptance. After the simulation ended, he approached me. I do not like this, Murphy. I know, sir. I do not like that it works. Also understandable, sir. But I cannot deny the effectiveness. He paused, all 4 eyes meeting mine. You have proven your point, both you and Commander Brax. Perhaps there is value in teaching warriors to think as well as follow orders. High praise coming from you, sir. Do not let it go to your head. You are still the most aggravating subordinate I have ever had the misfortune to command. I'll treasure that, sir. Brax floated over to us. Captain, you're doing the thing. What thing? Velkoth asked suspiciously. The thing where you pretend you hate this, but you're actually starting to enjoy it. I can tell. Your scales are doing a little shimmy. My scales do not shimmy. They totally shimmy. Murphy, tell him about the shimmy. There's definitely a shimmy happening, sir. Velkoth's scales went purple. I am surrounded by idiots. Idiots who win battles, I pointed out. He was silent for a moment. Then something happened that I'd never seen before. Captain Velkoth, the most rigid, disciplined, by-the-book officer in the Galactic Military Academy, smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was there. Yes, he said quietly. Idiots who win battles. Perhaps that is what we need more of. 3 months later, the Galactic Military Academy held its first laughter protocol ceremony. Instead of standing in silence before the Sentinel Stone, cadets were required to tell a joke, share a story, or do something that made Brax's holographic form laugh. Only then were they considered ready to graduate. The silent ceremony had been retired, filed away in the archives along with all the other traditions that looked impressive but served no practical purpose. Some of the older instructors complained. Most of them grudgingly admitted that the new graduates were performing better in field exercises. I stood at the back of the Hall of Ancient Relics, watching as cadet after cadet approached the stone and did their best to entertain a 10,000-year-old warrior consciousness with a sense of humor. Some of them were terrible at it. Some were surprisingly good. All of them were trying, which was the point. Glorp was up next. He oozed up to the stone, his gelatinous form quivering with nerves. "Commander Brax," he said, his voice shaking through his translator. "Why did the Blobarian cross the galaxy?" "I don't know," Brax said, his hologram leaning forward with interest. "Why did the Blobarian cross the galaxy?" "Because he heard there was a planet where nervousness was considered a tactical advantage." Brax laughed, genuine and warm. "That's actually pretty good, kid. You're thinking about your species' traits as strengths instead of weaknesses. I like it. You pass." Glorp practically glowed with pride as he oozed back to his place in formation. Other cadets followed, each bringing their own interpretation of what humor meant to their species and culture. Velkoth stood next to me, watching the proceedings with what I'd learned to recognize as his version of contentment. His scales were a steady blue-green that meant he was at peace with his decisions, even if he didn't fully understand them. "This is not how I imagined my career would progress," he said quietly. "Disappointed, sir?" "Surprisingly, no." He glanced at me. "You have changed this academy, Murphy. Changed it in ways that I am still processing. But the results speak for themselves. Graduation rates are stable. Combat simulation scores are improving. And our cadets are showing initiative that I have not seen in decades. All because I sneezed. All because you refuse to be anything other than yourself, even in an environment designed to make everyone conform." He paused. "That is a valuable trait, even if it is extremely irritating to command." Brax's hologram drifted over to us. "You two are having a moment, it's beautiful. I'm getting emotional and I don't even have real emotions anymore, just holographic approximations." "Your approximations are sufficient," Velkoth said dryly. "Captain, was that almost a joke? Are you developing a sense of humor?" "Murphy, I think we broke him." "It's possible, sir, that you're becoming more human." Velkoth's scales flickered through several colors rapidly. "I am Corinthian. I will always be Corinthian. But perhaps I am learning to appreciate that different approaches have value, even when they contradict everything I was taught." "Character growth," I said. "I'm proud of you, sir." "Do not push your luck, Murphy." The ceremony continued, and I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in just a few months. The academy was different now, not completely transformed, but evolving. Traditional discipline was still taught, but now it was balanced with training in adaptive thinking and unconventional tactics. Cadets were encouraged to question orders, as long as they could justify their reasoning. The Warriors' Code had been updated to include a clause about maintaining perspective and not taking yourself too seriously. It was chaos. Organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. And it was working. After the ceremony ended, I walked through the academy grounds with Brax's hologram floating beside me. Cadets nodded as we passed, some with respect, some with amusement, all with recognition. "You know," Brax said, "when I woke up after 10,000 years, I expected to find that everything had gotten worse, that the galaxy had forgotten everything my civilization learned the hard way. And I was right. Everything had gotten worse. But then I met you and I realized that maybe some species remember the important things. Humans apparently never forgot how to be practical, adaptable, and just ridiculous enough to confuse your enemies. We're special like that. You really are. My civilization spent centuries building traditions and protocols and honor codes, and it killed us. Humans seem to have skipped that phase entirely and gone straight to figuring out what actually works. We've had our share of stupid traditions, I said. We're just better at abandoning them when they stop being useful, most of the time. Some of the time, occasionally. Brax laughed. That's honest, at least. You know what I think? I think humanity is the spiritual successor to what my people used to be, before we forgot. You've got the chaos, the creativity, the willingness to look stupid if it means surviving. That's worth more than all the honor codes in the galaxy. So what you're saying is, we're the chosen ones. I'm saying you're the ones who didn't choose to be idiots about the whole warrior thing. Which, in a galaxy full of species that did choose to be idiots about it, makes you special by default. We reached the Hall of Ancient Relics again. The stone sat on its pedestal, still glowing with that ethereal blue light. But it felt different now. Less intimidating. More like a wise old mentor who'd been waiting for someone to finally get the joke. What happens now? I asked. You going back to sleep? Are you kidding? I've been asleep for 10,000 years. I'm done with sleeping. I'm going to stick around, keep teaching, keep annoying Captain Velkoth, and see how much chaos we can introduce into military doctrine before someone stops us. That's the best plan I've heard all day. Besides, Brax added, his holographic form flickering with what might have been emotion. Someone needs to make sure you don't get yourself killed doing something heroically stupid, and I get the feeling you specialize in heroically stupid. It's basically my entire personality. Then we're going to get along great, Murphy. You and me, we're going to revolutionize warfare by making it functional again instead of ceremonial. We're going to train warriors who survive instead of warriors who die gloriously. And we're going to drive every traditionalist in the galaxy absolutely insane. Sounds perfect. When do we start? We already started, kid. The moment you sneezed during that ridiculous ceremony and woke me up. Everything since then has been the revolution in progress. I looked back at the academy, at the cadets moving through their training, at the instructors trying to adapt to new methods, at Velkoth standing in a window looking simultaneously exhausted and more alive than I'd ever seen him. You know, I said, I really was just trying not to sneeze. Best accidental revolution ever. Thanks, I'll put that on my resume. We stood there for a moment, a human sergeant and a holographic warrior from a dead civilization, watching the future take shape in a place designed to honor the past. It was weird. It was imperfect. It was probably going to cause countless problems down the line. It was going to be great. Somewhere behind us, I heard Velkoth's voice raised in frustration as a cadet asked him to explain why uniforms had to be a specific color when camouflage would be more practical. I heard the cadet's point being made with perfect logic and just enough sass to be technically respectful, while still being annoying. We've created monsters, Brax said, sounding proud. Functional monsters who ask good questions. The best kind. I smiled, turned away from the hall, and headed back to the training grounds. There was work to do, protocols to disrupt, and an entire military academy to slowly convert into something that actually made sense. And it all started because I sneezed during a ceremony, and a 10,000-year-old warrior thought it was hilarious. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, and sometimes if you're lucky you get to be part of the joke. Hey Murphy, Brax called after me. Same time tomorrow? I want to teach your class about the strategic value of fake mustaches. Fake mustaches? Fake mustaches? Trust me, it's going to be great, I laughed. Because of course it was going to involve fake mustaches. Of course we were going to militarize facial hair. Of course this was my life now. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. The drill captain had ordered silence, the human sergeant had laughed, and the ancient relic had roared with him. And together they were going to teach the galaxy that sometimes the best warriors are the ones who remember that war is supposed to be survivable, adaptable, and just weird enough to keep the enemy guessing.